So really the sky is the limit for what we are doing. I think that 5 years from now, we'll look back at 2024 and we'll be like, I cannot believe there was a time that we developed AI without audits. Just like now we're thinking, there was a time when cars didn't use seatbelts, or there was a time when you could buy cocaine in pharmacies. Now we realize that we're in a better position in terms of taking care of people and making sure that those that we develop innovation do so responsibly.
Welcome to the Imagine AI Live podcast. I'm your host, Chris Madden, and today we have with us Gemma Galdon Clavell from Eticas AI. Gemma, how are you doing?
Hi, how are you? I'm great.
I hear the sirens in the background. You must be in New York City.
I am in New York City, and you cannot, that sounds this city. It's so much this city. It's crazy.
And we're very happy to talk with you. You're a founder of an AI company that was started in 2012. We have our Imagine AI Live Impact Conference in New York City on July 12th. And so we're trying to get a hold of the AI startup scene in New York, and very happy to talk with you today.
Likewise.
Gemma, tell me, what is Eticas AI?
So we're a very unlikely startup. You mentioned how we started working in this space in 2012, initially as a nonprofit, trying to be useful in trying to grasp how was technology impacting on society and what were the positive things and the negative things that technology was bringing us, with a deep commitment to technology being used for good, but also with the understanding that wide adoption only comes with trust. The reason why most people in the world got COVID vaccines is because we trust the system. There's clinical trials, there's lots of measures out there to ensure that we can trust medicine or food when we go to a supermarket. So trust is kind of the prerequisite for wide adoption. And if we want to make the most of technological innovation, we need to also work on trust. And so for the last 12 years, we've been working on ways to build that trust at a time when it's been really, really hard, because the emphasis coming from Silicon Valley on these, move fast and break things. And if what you break are fundamental rights, it doesn't matter. That's really not made things easy. But I think that now we are at a moment where people are realizing that if we want to make the most of tech, we need to also make sure that tech is responsible. And again, I use the vaccine example. No one would argue against clinical trials, like testing things before we actually sell them. No one would would argue against food controls before anything gets to the supermarket. No one would argue against controls to make sure that cars are safe and that the brakes are working before they can be sold to you. So it's basically just bringing the tech industry into the 21st century, where customers and users really want that trust and want to make sure that people developing tech for them really care about them.
Yeah, trust is incredibly important, and everything's moving faster and faster. And I feel a lot of people don't know exactly who to trust. And it's a very scary, overwhelming time, it feels, for many. So could you explain a little bit of how people use Eticas AI?
We're a company that builds software to audit AI systems. That means that we inspect AI systems and we look for inefficiencies. Inefficiencies mainly based on bias, because that's one of the main things that we find in AI systems and models. AI has a huge problem with bias. And bias it's not a bug, it's a feature. AI will always discriminate. AI will always identify outliers and push them out of the system. So unless we take proactive steps to keep those outliers in, we're going to have a huge problem with discrimination. And outliers is women in banking data sets. When we go to the bank, we get between 10 and 20 times less services than men because we are underrepresented in training data. So the AI picks up on the fact that in the past, we've not been the mainstream client. Men with stable jobs. And so the AI sees us as less desirable clients and reproduces that idea that we have more risk. And that happens across the board. I was in JFK last week and I was stopped because the facial recognition didn't recognize me. And they put me through a really bad time, even though facial recognition is completely voluntary. We know that it's a technology that fails more on women when they should, I had TSA employees. They had all my documents to check my face, but still they made me go through a really bad time. And that's probably because I'm a woman. I'm not young. And these systems are trained on data from the internet. And on the internet, most women are young. And so, of course, there's going to be more mistakes with me, more error rates with women. So that's what it means when we say that AI keeps pushing outliers out. That means that anyone who's different, anyone who is not part of the majority, will experience discrimination by AI systems. And sometimes we may want that discrimination. Like, if we are giving housing, public housing, we don't want people who have a lot of wealth to access that housing. But we don't want to leave women out of banking decisions and financial inclusion. We don't want people to be discriminated because of the color of their skin. We don't want people to be discriminated because of their age or their zip code. And that's what we find when we audit these systems, that oftentimes decisions are being made based on things that should not be relevant. There's a really interesting case that we didn't do, but it was an audit of a hiring system. Today, if you apply for a job, the most likely scenario is that your CV is going to initially be screened by an AI system. Well, the AI was picking up the fact of being called Jared and having played lacrosse in university and mentioning that in your CV as a good thing, as an indicator of your performance, which is just crazy. It just means that in the people that were hired in the past, a lot of them were called Jared. A lot of them played lacrosse. And so the system picks up these patterns and then seeks to reproduce them. But you don't want to make hiring decision based on people's names or what they played in university. That's just a really bad decision. And so what we are doing is we're turning bias into a performance issue and saying, if your system is biased, it's not making good decisions. And so our software allows people developing or using AI to identify when the system is making inefficient decisions.
With the Jared lacrosse example, so somebody was using AI to help screen resumes, but they didn't realize that it was pulling out people with certain attributes more so than others. And so your software would go in there and make people aware that this AI has this bias.
Exactly. We recognize, we pick up from the models what indicators are being used and what those indicators mean in terms of bias. So in this case, we would see a lot more men being hired. And when trying to understand why, we would realize that the system is prioritizing the people called Jared and who played lacrosse. So that's what we allow developers and implementers to identify. It's not that difficult a thing to do. It just needs to be done. And I think that until now, unfortunately, the industry has been so much focused on other things and it's forgotten that, again, unless we address the issue of bias and trust, I don't think we'll get to AI impacting our lives in the way that it could and that it should, just because we are not investing in the right things. It's like someone coming up with the idea of a car and forgetting to invest in brakes or seat belts. These things are important too. It's great that your engine can go really fast, but you can only make the most of that engine going really fast if you have brakes and seat belts.
Could you maybe explain another example of a case that you found bias in AI before?
We found bias in so many instances. So basically everything that we audit, and we have the best clients, people that come to us, that have been coming to us for the last 7 years of us doing this now with software. The people that come to us are people that really care about this, and still they are using really problematic systems. There's a really terrible case that, again, we didn't audit. The cases that we have, because our clients are the best, are not that dramatic, even though we still find similar things, but not as dramatic as the Optum case in the US. That is an algorithm that was used, an AI system that was used to prioritize people in the emergency room at hospitals. It was used by 100 hospitals in the US. When it was audited, researchers found that the system had been trained on financial data and not medical data. That means that if you were in the emergency room and your disease was expensive, you were being rushed. But if your disease was cheap, you were being asked to wait, regardless of how serious your disease was. That means if you had a heart attack, because heart attacks can often be quite cheap to solve if they're seen on time, when, the triage at the emergency room is really, really important, because it can be quite cheap to cure. That meant they would ask you to wait, maybe we'll see you in a couple of hours. And if you had cancer, which is terrible, but it doesn't really matter if you're seen in the morning or in the afternoon, because the way that the disease gets worse, it's not that quick. But you would be rushed through the emergency room. So again, it's an issue of bad decisions. In this case, you are using the wrong data to train the system. So when we audit, we can identify all these inefficiencies that at any given time in the training data, in the decisions that the engineers make, in the way that the data has been labeled, in the way that the results are then being shared with the teams that make the final decision. There's so many times we have a map of all the moments in which things can go wrong. And it's like there's 18 moments of bias in the life cycle of an AI system, like 18 moments when things can go wrong. And we need systems to pick up on that. And that's what our auditing does. We pick up on those moments if something went wrong, and then we help developers fix those moments of bias.
Okay. And so that was my next question is when you determine these biases, how are you helping the developer fix them?
So this is a platform. So people subscribe to the platform. They can use it whenever they want. Every 3 months, by default, we launch an audit just for documentation's sake to make sure that we have information on every single model. But basically, through uploading, we have a data schema. Engineers upload a series of data sets without personal information, just data sets with the attributes that they're dealing with. And then the platform shows them, organizes that information in ways that for them to see how the specific attributes like gender, ethnicity, age, geographical location, anything, how does that perform over time? Like in those 18 moments of bias, where are those attributes suffering? And then with that diagnosis, engineers can go back and retrain the model, incorporate rules, use synthetic data. There's lots of different ways, depending on when the problems are emerging, to address the specific problems that we may find. And that can be used for systems developed for hiring, for banking decisions, for people making decisions on client segmentation, in marketing, in the medical field. Historically, most of our clients have been in the medical field, so we are auditing in cancer screening. How well are we predicting for cancer? And are we predicting for cancer in ways that really respect the fact that cancer impacts on women at this rate, or younger people at this rate? Like, we're not forgetting the demographic composition of people that suffer illnesses. And the results that we are seeing are so concerning in terms of our clients. When they see our platform, they're like, I had never seen the data like this. Like, they had no visibility. Like, in a way, sometimes I explain what we do. And one of the things that we do is we also record data from what happens in the end. So not just what the AI said had to happen. So the AI said, these are the profiles that are best positioned for you to make a final hiring decision. We also record, so who was actually hired in the end? So we could also measure when the inefficiencies brought in by what we call the human in the loop, when it's people that are intervening with the decisions that the AI made. But because we have that kind of visibility, we allow engineers to see what are the decisions that are being facilitated by their systems. I often say that even AI auditing or any kind of safety testing for AI tools today, it's like you had Boeing in front of you and you asked them, so, have you done the most you could to make sure that your planes are safe? And they said, yes. I'm like, okay. Do you have someone who's responsible for safety? Yes. Okay. And if you have someone responsible for safety and you tell me that you've passed all these tests, I want to let you fly. It's not that we're not asking for more than that, like, a self-declaration of I'm doing things well, but also if the plane falls off the sky, no one is recording it. And that's one of the things that caused more concern for me when I started working in this space. It's like engineers don't even know that these planes are crashing, that these systems are making really bad decisions. They never have visibility over that because their visibility ends with their predicted outcome. But what they predicted in the model may not be what actually happened in the end. So we need tools that allow us to capture that data and for engineers to have visibility over the whole decision-making cycle. So that's what the platform allows, for all that decision-making cycle to be taken into account and for decisions to be made upstream to make sure that in the end you get a really good audit score.
Makes a lot of sense, and that's a good analogy. When you're talking about a lot of your clients are in the medical field, are there other categories of industries that people are using this software? I
think that right now, medical and hiring are really like top of mind for most organizations. Medical, it's like sector specific. Hiring across the board. So we have all kinds of clients from public and private sector that are using hiring algorithms to make decisions, and really concerned about something that I think we need to talk more about, which is the idea of inherited liability in AI. Because oftentimes companies are using models, foundation models developed by others, and that happens in LLMs, but also in recommender systems. there's this idea that you may buy something that you think works well. And of course, the salespeople have told you it works really well, that all the compliance has been done, all the necessary tests have been done. But if you're the one making the final decision on who gets a transplant, who gets a heart, who gets a job, who gets a mortgage, who can access university, who gets benefits, like all the decisions that are being made more and more with the use of AI, the liability is yours. Like the liability is with the last mile of that decision. And so many of our clients are not so much developers. We have some clients that are developing, but we see a growing concern in the implementers of those technologies that have technical teams, but smaller technical teams, because they rely on third-party foundation models. And we're seeing a lot of inefficiencies in that kind of B2B relationship.
A lot of these end users, they're getting the filtered out feed, or these are our final hiring decisions, or this is what we think should be done with your health decisions. But you don't see all the decisions made beforehand to like put that selection in front of you. And so you, like you said, you don't know what mistakes have been made beforehand and what, people have been left by the wayside because of the AI. And was that done in a logical way, or there was a problem with the algorithm? So when your clients, you're talking about the foundational models and people are using different ones, is it mostly the main LLMs, the big dogs out there that you're auditing, or is there some like smaller LLMs or in-house LLMs people are using?
So both the bigger and the smaller, the same with recommender systems. So we audit both LLMs and recommender systems. Recommenders are the systems that allow us to make decisions. They're not necessarily text-based, even though they can be text-based, but it's what decides what content you see on social media, or whether you get a mortgage. Like the technical dynamic is exactly the same. It's just a system that gathers data from the past, looks for patterns, tries to reproduce those patterns. And based on that, we get Netflix recommendations, GPF recommendations, or medical treatments, or a job. It's the same technical backend. For LLM, it's a bit different. But in both cases, we work both for the big name developers, but also the many implementers and the many companies in the middle that are emerging that promise to take those foundation models and make them better for your use case. We are seeing is a lot of really bad actors getting in that space and selling a trust and accountability that they're not actually providing. There was a report by the World Privacy Forum just a couple of weeks ago that said that they found that almost 40% of the AI governance software out there was not only not diminishing the risks of using AI in terms of bias, liability, lack of trust, etc., but the software itself, the way that it approached governance, was creating additional risks. So we are seeing a space that, because of the lack of benchmarks and metrics and good practices, a lot of people are getting in this space promising things that they're actually not only not doing, but also they're making the problem worse. So one of the things that we are hoping, and the reason why we positioned ourselves as auditors, is because we want to kind of organize the field. We've been in this for a long time. We are the spin out of a nonprofit. So we really care about this. Everything we do is about impact. We optimize for impact. And so we want to make sure that the mechanisms that we develop to inspect AI systems are the right ones, are the ones that protect people, but also the ones that lead the industry to do better and build better products. And unfortunately, we're seeing a lot of, a friend of mine would say, charlatans getting into this space and selling software that is not really addressing those issues. And as auditors, we can kind of set the standards. Like, if you want to be audit ready, these are the things you need to do. And the key to building better AI is in those things that you need to do.
Think of you as like the sheriff in this AI world, and you're there making sure people are doing things by the books. And so I imagine you're saying, like, they talk about like these startups that are like a wrapper around ChatGPT. They take one of these foundational models and then they do something else with it. And so you're saying that a lot of those companies are actually making this trust and safety worse than just the foundational model itself.
Yeah, often these companies promise to take trust more seriously, to only train the models with information that is lawful, has been harvested from lawful sources, to optimize for lack of bias, like making sure that there's no lack of fairness in how the information that you receive is not different from the information that other people receive just because you're a man, or just because or because you're gay, or like anything that the system picks up on you, because you're poor, because you're rich, because you're white, because you're black. Like, there's so many things, so many attributes of who we are that the system may pick up on and make decisions based on that. And some of them are like, you you won't even notice, but some of them can be profoundly problematic in terms of how these systems decide to relate to us. There's a lot of promise. Oh no, we do this better because we tailor it to your needs. And we're seeing a lot of really sloppy work in that kind of middle layer of trust and safety providers.
Mm-hmm. So of the foundational language models, if you had to rank like the most safe to the least safe, how would you rank them?
Oh, but like the most safe, what? Like in terms of the technology underlying?
Yeah, and the least bias.
There's a lot of AI used in logistics or, like optimization of processes that it's actually really great. Like anything that is, going through lots of data, finding patterns, but there's no personal data. There's no impact on people's rights or anything. Like I think, AI in GPS is great. Like, I'm old enough to remember when we would drive with maps and it's a massive improvement.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's so much potential in these systems that take out the burden of the routine work and that can help us see things that the naked eye or the experience that we have, the narrow experience that we have as just one doctor and just one cop or just one teacher. If you have the data of what happens to everyone, there's so much, such a better understanding that you can get on complex dynamics. So like, I think there's a lot out there that is incredibly like positive, like, net positive, like everything we can get out of those systems is good. And with the rest, it's not that it's inherently bad. It's just that we're not taking the precautions. Like, again, it's like, in the 19th century, you could buy cocaine in pharmacies. I've been doing research on how cocaine was marketed back then. It's like, oh, it's been tested for everything and it's great. Nothing is safer than this. It's cocaine. It's going to, improve your life. Today you can, because we've built a mechanism that ensures that things that can harm you don't get to you. I think that's the only thing that we're missing. Like, everything is a double-edged sword. Mm-hmm. Everything has different potential uses. How do we minimize the bad uses and maximize the good uses? So it's not about discarding AI, even though there's an issue about climate impact and the energy that they consume. I think it's a completely different debate, but it's not about saying we don't want to automate decision making. We're going to automate decision making, but we want to do it well. So, we want advanced medicine. We just don't want advanced medicine to kill a lot of people. So we have clinical trials. We want planes. And yes, planes may fall off the sky, but we create mechanisms to ensure that we minimize the risk of planes falling off the sky. Unfortunately, the AI industry has not paid enough attention to all of those things. And so we have the equivalent of planes falling off the sky or vaccines that have not been tested on humans before actually being inoculated into large sections of the population. We're just trying to generate the incentive in the industry to pay attention to this, because I really believe that we need to save the AI industry from itself. Unless we create those good incentives, I don't think we'll make the most of this incredible piece of human knowledge and technological advance that we have created as a society. I think we should be very proud of AI, but we need to get this right. And getting this right under a democratic system means you maximize the positive, but you minimize the negative, and you invest in minimizing the negative because you do not want to do harm. This idea of do no harm, I think should be first and foremost top of mind for the AI industry, and it hasn't been there. So through auditing, we want to create those incentives.
So I have a thought about auditing of image generators and video generators, and I use DALL-E and OpenAI's often. It's curious to me because when I noticed this, it was around the Gemini scandal when they rolled out their thing, and there was images of people would like show me a picture of George Washington, and it would be like a black George Washington or a black Pope. And then I was using OpenAI's image generator, and I'm just asking it to make like a room full of people at a party at a AI conference in Las Vegas, and it's just all white people. I was, groups of people, and it's not diverse. And wondering how people scale that, and do you have thoughts on trying to make that more representative?
Oh, totally. We need to understand how these systems work. Again, it's about capturing data from the past, looking for patterns and reproducing those patterns. There was a really cool exercise that went really wrong that the museum here in New York did. I think it was a couple of years ago. They built a Gen AI tool where you could upload a picture and it would turn the picture into a painting. And so you could upload your own picture and you'd be like, if you were a guy, like a man on a horse in the 19th century or something like that. And then someone uploaded an image of Obama. And it made Obama white because in the training data, most men in paintings are white. So the system, again, the outlier is being a black man. And so we eliminate the part of Obama that is an outlier in the history of painting, and we only keep the man. And so it made him white. Then someone uploaded a picture of Oprah Winfrey, and it kept the skin color, but it made her young because the system did have enough images of black slaves, women slaves in paintings. And so in that case, the system did find the pattern. And so the outlier was kept, but in young form, not like an old black woman was not painted in the history of painting. So I think we need to understand first that we have that history. And we have synthetic data, we have rules. There's so many things that we can do to incorporate this. Of course, you need to have an understanding that this is a problem. And unfortunately, that I don't think there's an understanding about this. There's not an understanding that this is something that engineers need to fix, that you need to make sure that your training data is representative of society and that you do not reproduce the discriminatory dynamics of the past. But then also when we train the model, so even if we make all the data that comes in fair, there's going to be additional layers of bias that are going to be incorporated, like this identification of outliers and pushing out of outliers. And that's all you can do is audit, like monitor the system so that whenever something like this emerges, you pick it up as soon as possible and you fix it. That's the only solution. This is not like the problem of bias and the elimination of outliers in AI is not something that's going to go away. As I said, it's not a bug, it's a feature. It's not something that will be solved with more data, with more advanced systems. It's only going to get worse. All we can do is monitor for it. And once we identify a pattern that we don't like, we can correct it. But again, it's not that hard. Like, we monitor medicine, we monitor food, like we monitor everything. I don't know. I don't know if you buy furniture from IKEA, but IKEA does post-market monitoring. And if something doesn't perform as expected or as it was supposed to perform because kids fall off cribs, there's a system to recall all that. We don't have any of that for AI. It's just crazy that IKEA selling tables and cribs has a lot more regulation and needs to care a lot more about the impact of their products than any AI developer out there. That's just crazy. And it's also unfair to developers that may want to build things that work better. Like, I think we need to create the opportunities and reward those in the AI industry that are trying to address these problems and build better systems.
It feels to me like AI industry is a bit like the Wild West right now. And all these different companies are moving at breakneck speeds, trying to build the next fastest model and outcompete the competition. And everybody's using it. And there's all these companies building wrappers on top of these foundational models and doing so many things. And your comment there about how it's not going to get better, it's only going to get worse. Could you elaborate on that?
Basically, even with more data, things are going to be harder to control. It's important to control at the source, but we will find that a lot of the monitoring needs to happen once something is already out there. So we need to be able to identify we're going to have a lot more information from lots of different parts of the world. Like right now, most of the LLMs and Gen AI models are trained on Western text and Western art. As we start incorporating new languages, we'll have more of that. We may have languages even more biased than English. We may have cultures where mistreatment of specific groups may be even worse than what we experience in the West. And so those systems are only going to reproduce those same dynamics in ways that it's going to be hard for us to understand because we're not familiar with what those dynamics are. So as Gen AI becomes global, there's all these challenges that emerge from different geographies and different ways of talking and creating art. But also with more data, there's more difficulty in controlling where the data comes from. And so monitoring over time becomes key to making sure that harm is not produced. So this idea of auditing as a key part of post-market monitoring it's just crucial. I think it's the only way that we can hope to deploy these systems in ways that are conducive to trust and safety.
I guess that's a bit of the future vision of Eticas AI is that what you're offering is just something that is a standard that every company needs to do in order to weed out these problems that are inherent with the AI system. Could you maybe talk a bit about your product roadmap and where you see your company in a year or 2, 5 years? I ask people, where do you see yourself in 5 years? They're like, I don't know where this technology is going to be, but your thoughts on the future of your company.
Yeah, I think like the best way of thinking about us, maybe it's like the clinical trials of AI, is that like layer where we get visibility on how AI actually works with humans. When you develop a vaccine, you can do tests in the lab and then with animals, but then before you hit the market, you need to do clinical trials. And no one sees clinical trials as compliance. They see it as part of the development of the vaccine. You learn so much about how your active components react in real life settings that everyone across like the whole supply chain is paying attention to what's happening in the clinical trials to then get all that data and go back and improve their vaccines. So we play the same role like with that space. When AI hits society, we identify what's happening and then we monitor this over time. So the future that I see is basically us being that fundamental key exercise as a clinical trial. With the good thing is that it's a lot cheaper than a clinical trial. We don't need to mobilize a lot of people. We can just mobilize data and then we can run our software. So it's a lot cheaper and less burdensome than actually doing a clinical trial. But I see Eticas, our software, being used for any and every piece of AI software being deployed out there in any different field. So like you may have a foundation model and it's used in the medical field and in hiring and in marketing. Every single application is going to have some sort of post-market monitoring. So really the sky is the limit for what we are doing. I think that 5 years from now, we'll look back at 2024 and we'll be like, I cannot believe there was a time that we developed AI without audits. Just like now we're thinking, there was a time when cars didn't use seatbelts, or there was a time when you could buy cocaine in pharmacies. Now we realize that we're in a better position in terms of taking care of people and making sure that those that would develop innovation do so responsibly. So I think that for Eticas, the sky's the limit. And I can't wait to see more competitors out there. Like I think that we want to build a field. It can't be just us. So more people getting into this space, understanding that we need different perspectives and knowledge when building AI. I think one of the problems with AI is that it's been very much developed only by engineers. I often use the example, like if you want to build a shed, you can be a plumber and you probably can build a shed, something that, stands a few rainfalls every once in a while. If you want to build a skyscraper, you need plumbers, but you also need architects and painters and electricians. And in the end, the best plumber, it's not only the one who's good at plumbing, but also at talking to all these other professionals to build something that is robust. I think that the AI industry has not yet understood that if we want AI to be key and to make a difference in sensitive areas like hiring, medical decisions, benefit allocation, financial inclusion, if we want to see AI in all of those spaces, we need those plumbers, those engineers to start working with other people. At Eticas, most of our staff, we're quantitative social scientists. We have this combination of understanding data and understanding society. And that combined with the capabilities of AI developers, I really think that we can build much better technologies and much better solutions through that bringing together a different expertise. So we hope that through auditing, we also build that need in technical teams to start incorporating additional knowledge to make sure that developers code for a society that they understand. Like it's very hard to code for something that you don't know how it works. So we can help with that. We can turn the insights from social data into something that developers can use to build better AI.
That's wonderful, Gemma, and I totally see the need for it. I didn't exactly understand your company going into this interview, but I certainly do now. So thank you for that. You mentioned your company there. I would like to just ask some questions about the startup and what it's like building the startup. So how many employees do you have right now?
We're 16.
16. Wow. And is everyone based in New York, or are some of those people remote?
We're fully remote. So basically what happened is that I felt we had hit a ceiling in our work in Europe after 10 years. And in Europe, like we've changed the regulation. We've been so fundamental in building awareness. And one of the reasons why Europe is leading the way in regulation is because there's a lot of actors, and I think that we've been central to that, building awareness among policymakers of the need to create the incentives for better technology. But I felt we had hit a ceiling. And so I came to the US with no clear expectations, just thinking I think that we need to go somewhere we can get bigger. But also in Europe, when we developed relationships with the industry in Europe for big tech, it's their PR departments. We don't have developers in Europe. And so I wanted to come here and be able to talk to development teams and not see this as a compliance issue, but a performance issue. And I landed here, and I was very lucky because I was invited to an event with a lot of investors, and I was asked to pitch what we were doing, which back then was not software. We were a consulting organization. And someone who's very high in Silicon Valley came to me and said, I think that what you're doing has a lot of potential, and I think that you should go build a startup and start building software. And initially I was like, I've never done that. Yeah. But when I went to some of our mentors and several people wrote checks very quickly. And so we raised a super angel round very quickly.
What year was this?
That was last year.
Oh, great. And when did you move to New York?
I moved here last spring. So
wow.
Yeah, it was very unexpected, very quick. But I'm like, when I see an opportunity, I like to jump on it. And I love the challenge. And I think that even when we did the Super Angel round, I had interviews with VCs. And I could tell they were like, there's no way you're going to build software. Like, you're not an engineer. You're a woman. You're from Europe. You have an accent. I'm not even based in Silicon Valley. We chose to sell in New York. I could totally see like how they did not think that I could pull this off. And now when I go back and I do demos with them, they're like, wow. Just the fact that you've been able to build something is just incredible. And I'm super proud of myself and the team for pulling it off and for understanding also what it means to work with a CEO who does not have the technical background, even though I have the data background. And actually what we find is that the technical background and the data background give us an advantage that not a lot of people have. So now we are raising our seed round and hoping to continue to build. We have the platform for recommender systems is already live, and we have clients. And we are piloting the platform for LLMs. So having close conversations with actors in the industry, because one of the challenges with LLMs is that in order to audit, we need user data. So it's a bit harder than auditing recommender systems when the data that we need is really not sensitive. So we're trying to talk to the people that have come to us interested in an auditing software for LLMs and be like, okay, we don't have the platform yet, but help us understand what the requirements are, because we've designed what we want the platform to do. The main stopper right now is a data schema. So help us work out a data schema, and then let's launch this. So hopefully after the summer, we'll have the platform for LLMs also fully operational.
Oh, that's really exciting. And that's a bit of my background is I've done a lot of podcasts for venture capitalists. I don't know if you know who Harry Stebbings of 20VC is. He's a big venture capitalist podcast, and we helped make him really popular on TikTok. And then I'm aware of the All In podcast, like Jason Calacanis and these venture capital startup guys. And I've really learned a lot from listening to their podcasts. I think it's just a really exciting space, and people willing to, to invest in you and give you this money to give you this runway to build something that the world needs. And it's really exciting. So you're from Barcelona in Spain, and the main advantages for being a startup in New York or in America versus a startup in Spain, what would you say they are?
Oh, here the sky's the limit. In Europe, I felt the sky here every single day. I'm like, I have a lot more potential. Yes, it's like we can do a lot more. We can grow so much, but you feel that everything is running against you. Like we haven't taken any funding from Spain, but sometimes people have been like, oh, talk to my friend because they're investing. And then we talk to them, but their checks are like, we get $5,000. And I'm like our minimum is 100,000. We've also talked to people like, no, they're like middleman. Like they put you in touch with people who may give you money, but then they take a cut. I'm like, what? Yeah. It's like the worst kind of business you can have. Like you're taking money from the innovators. Like, how do you sleep at night? And I'm sure there's people that do that in the US, but we haven't come across them. And in Spain, we've come across this, like the first round of conversations we had. The second actor that we spoke to, that's what they did. So I was like, we're done. This is not for us. And I think it's hard enough to be an outlier in the VC world. Like, again, a woman without an engineering background. That's like, it's hard enough if you're also not in the geography where these things happen. And I think that being in New York, I think that it sends people a message. I think that when you move to New York, that tells people that you are ambitious. And I think that in terms of people investing in EU, people like to see that. I don't think that the super angels that invested in us would have done the same thing if I was still in Barcelona or Spain or Paris or Brussels. It doesn't really matter. I think that the US has this potential thing that people really get. And in any case, we're super happy here. Like, we came here because I wanted to give myself a chance to grow professionally, but also because we wanted that as a personal opportunity. And we're just really enjoying the experience. So whatever happens, it was a really great move.
I really love to hear that. Yeah, the American innovation and entrepreneurship is top in the world. The non-technical founder, I reminisce with that because I'm not very technical myself. And I wonder about, like, how did you find your CTO or your right-hand man or right-hand person to understanding the software, understanding the technical side of things?
Well, I found several. So we do have a CTO, but that's not the whole story. Like, I also have a really good full stack developer, a really good data science lead, a very good chief of operations. So like, I don't think that, like, I think I needed all of that. And it's been so interesting for me to build something with them, taking into account all their experience and their knowledge. And I don't think it hasn't just been my knowledge. It hasn't just been the knowledge of the CTO. Yeah. It hasn't just been the knowledge of the data science lead. Like, it's really been a conversation and building a new understanding of the challenge every single day. And I love that. Like, I really feel that we are inventing something. Like, when every day you go into the lab and the results are a bit different. You're like, oh, let's add this piece here. Let's change that thing there. And it's very much a collective effort. And in terms of teamwork, it's one of the most rewarding things I've ever done. And I feel so accomplished, and I'm so proud of what we've managed to do. But I don't have a co-founder. I'm a sole founder. Eticas started with other people, but I'm going to be very honest with you. I've been stabbed on the back a lot of times. It's really hard. I think it's hard for everyone. But as a woman, to build alliances, everyone thinks that, when things are really bad, they give us a chance. But then when things are good, get out of the way. And I felt that in myself, and I felt that with others, and I've seen it with friends, and I've seen it with people that I follow and that I admire. So it's not that I'm not against having a co-founder, and I'd love to find someone with whom I have that kind of relationship. But if I don't, that's also fine. Like, I think that you can build teams where you build that willingness to do things differently. And it's not only based on the potential success of the company, it's also on what an amazing thing you are developing and how you're marking the world is going to be through this thing, or at least one of the marks in the world. Like, we are the team that is going to put AI bias in the center of the conversation, not only as a problem, but also as something that can be solved. It is like inventing clinical trials and making sure that from, a moment on, vaccines are safe for people to use. Like, I think that I really feel, and I certainly try to build that in my team, and I think that they feel it as well, that we are building something important. And so I think that we have that without the traditional makeup of a startup, which makes things harder because VCs also use a lot of data, and they want patterns. And I'm not the pattern in any way, shape, or form. Mm-hmm. But, I've been beating the odds since I was born. My mom had me at 14. My life has not been easy. But it's like, it's my, it's part of who I am. I beat the odds. And so every time I get a no from a VC, I'm like, okay, watch me grow, with or without you.
No, that's you're made for this space, that's for sure. What advice do you have for people entering university on what to study right now?
Oh, my God. I'd say statistics. I think the heart of everything tech right now is statistics. So whatever you do, make sure that statistics are a big component. It can be engineering, it can be math, it can be sociology, it can be linguistics. Like any profession where statistics are at the heart or play a big role, I think will put people in a really good path for building stuff.
What advice do you have for people entering the workforce?
Oh, God. Well, first, beat the AI screener for your CV. Like, learn to play with that because it's actually very, very easy.
Okay. We have to, because I've actually seen like Reddit posts on that. Like, I've applied to 100 different things and like no response. And like they're just screening it. And how do you beat the LinkedIn screener or the resume screener?
Let me tell you, when I do public speaking, I had so many people coming to me with frustration about this. People saying, listen, when I was just sending the CV, they would not interview me. And when I get an interview, they love me. Like this, my experience with humans is so different from my experience with the machines, which is it's just mind blowing how much people are suffering with this. But basically, again, understand these systems work on patterns. It's a combination of general patterns and the patterns of the company that you want to be recruited at. So try to understand who did they hire in the past and what do they have in common. And try to add those buzzwords in your CV. Then also look at the job ad and look at the wording and try to reproduce that wording. So if they say, we're looking for people with 20 years of experience in sales, you may want to say, even though I don't have 20 years of experience in sales, I have this other thing. Because the AI doesn't pick up on the fact that you're saying, I don't have that experience. It just picks up on the fact that you are reproducing those words. So again, identify the patterns that make the algorithm run and make sure that your CV has those patterns. And if you do that, I can guarantee your chances of getting to that interview will be a lot higher. I would be surprised if people doing that were not getting it. Of course, you cannot always know that, it's the Jareds and the lacrosse of the world. Oh. But there's other things that you can pick up on, like what kind of degrees they have, or even geographic things. Like, again, the AI picks on all kinds of patterns. Mm-hmm. AI is really stupid. It doesn't make a difference from, I did engineering from I was born in Austin. Both are patterns. So you just want to make sure that you reproduce that something of those patterns is seen in your CV.
Right. Well, that's really good advice. Thanks. What are you afraid of most when it comes to the future of AI?
That a combination of the inability of our regulators to do better and the carelessness of our big tech CEOs to do better will lead to really bad technology. I think that if that happens, it's not the end of the world. Like, it's at some point it's going to be fixed, because again, we're talking about systems that are making bad decisions, not just unfair decisions. These are bad decisions, fundamentally bad decisions. So I think that at some point this is going to be fixed. But every day that we don't fix it is someone who is not accessing things under conditions of fairness. It's people that don't get the transplant that they need, even though they comply with the requirements to get it. It's people that don't get a place in university, even though they should. It's people that don't get a job, even though they're the most qualified. So there's so much suffering and so much injustice in the process of us getting this right. Yeah, my biggest fear is that this combination of policymakers and big tech leaders not getting this right will slow down us being able to build good AI.
On the back of that, what are you hopeful for most when it comes to the future of AI?
That we realize that AI will only be of service to society once it's safe to use and once it builds trust with people. I think that understanding that these problems are not going to go away. Like, there's this understanding that with more data, AI will get better. No, things are going to get even harder. We can fix that, but we need to want to fix it. We need to make proactive efforts to fix the things in AI that don't work well by default. So I'm hopeful that we'll understand that AI needs to do better and it can do better, and that auditing is a key piece in building the incentives for the whole industry to do better.
What's your personal favorite use of AI in your daily life?
Oh my God, GPS. By far, and I know it's old, but it's the one that I feel like is the most useful on my, just because every other thing, like Netflix, like the recommendations from Netflix, I'm like, really? No. I can never trust what I get. When we use software at work, I'm very underwhelmed by some of the results. I use ChatGPT mainly to organize the bibliography when I write pieces, but it's like super lame things that I'm actually, it doesn't change my life. If I need to write a legal piece, I may ask ChatGPT for a template, ChatGPT or any other provider for a template, but it doesn't change my life. So, but GPS, actually like knowing how fast to get somewhere and how to get there, and especially in New York, when in the weekends, all subway lines are like changed, and you ask Google and Google knows that today the A is running on the C track. Wow. And then you can get places on time.
I'm sure you're using GPS there a lot in New York. And it's funny how, people probably like today don't think of GPS as AI, but it's a very, very powerful.
Totally. And it's great AI. And it's like, the logic is, it's machine learning all the way. Like it's the purest form of AI. Actually, a lot of the systems that we audit don't have machine learning. A lot of AI out there doesn't have machine learning. There was people talking that when you ask Alexa or any other home assistant to book you a table at a restaurant, there's a person in India making that phone call. So actually a lot of things around us that are called AI don't have machine learning, don't have the ability to learn from its own outcomes. GPS is a perfect AI technology and one of the most advanced.
Well, Gemma, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. This has been a fascinating conversation, and I can't wait to get it out to people.
Thank you for having me, Chris.
That's one small step for man.